Hey guys, welcome to CastCast. I am your host, Casty Strader, and today we're going to look over Week 10 matchups and predictions. Let's just go right into it. We're going to start with Colts and New England. That is over in Frankfurt. Sorry for that. But looking at this game, there's a lot of drama with New England. The possibility of Belichick getting fired and Belichick, kind of lashing back because he's obviously been, a pretty good coach for a long time. And I think that recently they've just hit a rough patch draft wise, to be honest with you. Looking at this game, we, for injuries, I mean, we have not too many, not too many for the Colts, obviously, not any big ones in any case. But then we also have for New England, we have some injuries that are just not that good. And then you look at the Patriots last 5 games, and obviously, they beat Buffalo, which was an outlier win to say the least. But they've lost the last 2, one against Miami, who they've lost twice to this season, and then to Washington last week. Washington proving that they didn't need Sweat or Chase to still limit New England, which, to be honest, isn't saying too much. But I do commend Washington's resiliency, I guess, with that. And then the Colts only winning 2 of their last 5, one against Tennessee and then one against Carolina last week, but losing against, some premier teams. Even though I would say that New Orleans has been kind of underperforming, and then they had kind of offensive breakout game against the Colts, who have been seemingly giving up, some good number of points, in most of these games. And then, against Carolina somehow, you know, uh, not giving up that much. But that's not saying much since Carolina is a pretty young quarterback, young offense. Really, the only veteran there is Thielen. But looking ahead to this game, I kind of just want to go with, who has the best player. I think New England's defense has looked kind of like a joke, to be honest with you. And I think that Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss are going to be able to dominate this game. And I think that Minshew is not going to really risk the ball and turn the ball over very much. And on a neutral site in Germany, I fully expect the Colts to kind of take control with the ground game. And with that, I'm going to predict a Colts win by 10 points, to be honest with you. Because I just think that they have too much of an offensive scheme to go after the New England Patriots with a defense that is struggling and doesn't really have an identity to me. But moving on to our next game, a very interesting game. We have Texans against the Bengals. The Texans not really given that much of a shot in this game, which I think, is kind of wrong. CJ Stroud obviously coming off of a record setting game. Obviously, they have a good amount of injuries, Jimmy Ward notably. Um, and then, I mean, but the thing is that you've got Jamar Chase is questionable, Sam Hubbard out, and then T. Higgins has been confirmed to be out. But yeah, Jamar Chase being injured, not very good. I will say this, the Bengals are on a hot streak. They obviously settled things against Buffalo very soundly, San Fran, Seattle, Arizona. Arizona being the only team here that really, to me, just isn't, a very impressive team to beat. But then you have Seattle, San Fran, and Buffalo, all playoff contending teams. And then you have the Texans, who they just kind of had an off game defensively against Tampa Bay. I didn't expect this to be the case. I think that Houston's defense is doing really, really well, albeit young, but they've been doing really well. Obviously, a defensive kind of minded team at this point, where the offense is overperforming by quite a lot. I don't think anybody expected CJ Stroud to be this good. And then, I mean, they have a decent run game. And then, of course, Nico Collins doing really, really well this year. Probably the only better rookie wide receiver that I would say would be doing better is Puka Nacua. But obviously, Houston trying to, stay alive in the playoff hunt. These are obviously two AFC teams. It would be huge for the Bengals to beat Houston, give them even more leverage over them because they are obviously in a very crowded and winning division this year. That is the strongest division in football. And with the way that Baltimore's playing, I fully expect them to potentially even get the 1 seed eventually, where the Chiefs just haven't looked as consistent as I really want them to. But Baltimore coming off a crazy win last week. So the Bengals are really, they have even though this is super, super close, losing a game in this instance in the middle of the season is, it's just going to be harder and harder. So they're going to look to win. I do kind of expect them to win. I think that they have a scrappy defense that's, going to be able to make things hard on CJ Stroud. He obviously came off an insane game, is looking very, very strong this year. Obviously, one crazy thing that I think about is if they start to win, the Texans will be able to ultimately, you get into a playoff spot. I wouldn't say easily, but they're on their way if they're to beat the Bengals, and then to hold the tiebreaker over another AFC team would be huge for them. But I'm sure the defense is going to really be trying to prep and play a lot better than they did last week, because last week was, pretty crazy. That being said, though, I'm still going to go with the Bengals. I think that they are the more experienced team. I think that's going to give them an edge, in what should be a close game, in my opinion. And I'm going to give them a 3-point advantage. I think that they score 24 in this game to 21 to Houston. But I don't think it's as lopsided as, the analytics say, to be honest with you. But yeah, Cincinnati by 3, more experienced team, more experienced quarterback. Not to say that CJ Stroud couldn't be on the same level as Burrow in a few years with the way he's playing, without any threat that's been doing it for years, as far as I'm concerned. And with Chase banged up, I just don't think that they're going to be able to run away with this game. But yeah, Cincinnati by 3. Moving on, we have my Packers, traveling to Pittsburgh to play the Steelers. Obviously, the Steelers, like I just mentioned, are in the most winning division in football right now. And my Packers coming off a win against a Rams team that was, kind of banged up. My worries about this game is that, you have Josh Nijman, questionable. He went left with a foot injury. Jair Alexander's shoulder is pretty bad, apparently, which I don't like shoulder injuries, and I don't think anybody should play on them. It makes it really hard to make plays. And I mean, it's sad because Jair finally looked like the Jair that we all recognized last week, making plays, disrupting passes. And Quay Walker being out, I think, even though I love the way Quay's been playing this week, I don't think it's that big of an issue. I think with Campbell being back, I think McDuffie was able to kind of shine against the run last week. Even as a backup, he really came in and accepted that next player up in the depth chart mentality. Kenny Clark being questionable is kind of bad, but I do think that the D line has been playing. He kind of missed some of the game last week, and they still played pretty well. I get it. It was against a struggling offense and a struggling quarterback ripping. But Rudy Ford being questionable isn't too bad to me. He missed last week. Um, Johnson came in to fill for him, and then you also had Owens, and they both played, really well. I couldn't have been happier with the way the backups played last week. Like, it's really kind of good. The thing about the Steelers that you look at is that obviously Minka Fitzpatrick is still out. Freiermuth is on IR. Their tight end, and then Montrevious Adams, their defensive tackle, is out. So they don't have a ton of injuries here, but overall, looking at this game, if I think if you have I think if you don't have Yash Nyman and you're starting and Rashid Walker is starting, you really got to be able to make sure that I guess you really got to make sure that he's not committing penalties. Otherwise, I think you're going to have a lot of problems. You obviously have TJ Watt over on the other side of the ball, who's, their star player on defense, especially with Minka being out. And then even Joey Porter Jr., the rookie cornerback, playing very, very well, having a very low, I think it's like in the 40s. It's hot. It's like a high 40 QBR rating when he's targeted. They obviously, he's come in and he really fits. He really fits this. And then I mean on the flip side, you have Patrick Peterson, who formerly on the Vikings for the last couple of years knows the Packers a little bit. So that kind of gives him a little bit of a leg up. Obviously, he doesn't really know Love that much, but it's the same offensive system that has been being run for years. And, I think that this is definitely going to be a tight game. I definitely don't think that, I think my Packers are going to fight an uphill battle, and especially it is in Pittsburgh. And, obviously Pittsburgh just knows that they know that they need to win. They need to keep on winning, and doing well in a tight division. And, looking at the Packers, I with Kenny Clark being injured, I think that Kobe Wooden came in and he did really well. They also put in Carl Brooks, who was, doing really well, but if you look at Pittsburgh, obviously Najee Harris has been doing well, Jalen Warren doing really well, and you've just got to not give up the big ball, I guess, to George Pickens, who, with some inexperienced guys in the secondary, especially if Jair doesn't play, you're talking about, Carrington Valentine, who did shine last week, Keyshawn Nixon, and Corey Ballantyne. It just, to me, really looks, it really looks, a little scary. And I'm sure they're going to emphasize that because Pickens is a really fast, wide receiver. You miss him for a second and he's gone, like Tyreek Hill or any of these other guys. But I was happy with the way that my defense played last week, even if it was against a backup quarterback. They played lights out, probably the best defense you've seen all year. Really good against the run, which, they have been struggling with. And I think that they go up against a team that has a little bit of a better run game, a little bit better of a running back. And, even with that, looking at Pittsburgh's depth chart, you know, Allen Robinson, George Pickens, and Deontay Johnson, I think that this team has been doing a really good job. And I think, I will say that, the Steelers' offensive scheme has been really off and on, to be honest with you. Where it's like, they looked really good against the Rams. They looked bad against Jacksonville's defense. And then against Tennessee, they scored 20. But otherwise, they've been, their offensive scheme has been shaky all year, much like the Packers, where who knows how it's going to say. I will say I think the Steelers are going to win this game. They're at home. I don't think this demographic is really that good either. I think that, the Packers can do really well. And they performed really well against adversity. I mean, there was, Aaron Donald doing things and other players, and they ultimately rose above the occasion. But I'm going to pick Pittsburgh by 3 because I think this is going to be a close game. Moving on, we have the Titans against the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers coming off a high scoring game against Houston last week where they barely lost and they put up a good amount of, points, but ultimately lost because, Houston and CJ Stroud had a day. Titans lost last week against Pittsburgh, a defense that is obviously far better than the Tampa Bay defense, in my opinion, and a banged up Tampa Bay defense where it's like Jamel Dean, Logan Hall are banged up, two of their starters, and then Kalijah Cansey, also hurt. But you kind of have Will Levis, taking over the reins here. So obviously, we'll see how they deal with him, the weapons that he has on Tennessee. I think that we've seen kind of a resurgence in Henry, where he's started to look like the Henry of old, like this amount of carries with this amount of yards is crazy, especially with how he started the year. Um, Tennessee obviously at this point is bottom of their division. Who knows what their plan is? I think that Will Levis has looked good, but then you also have Tampa Bay who is actually fighting and they could still very much win their division because it's a very close division. Um, minus Carolina, who obviously, has been having a very bad year. The thing about me is that Tampa Bay has been really inconsistent on offense. And I think that with like the likes of Jeffrey Simmons, on Tennessee, and I forget the other guy's name, Harold Landry. I think that they can get after Baker, who hasn't always had the cleanest pocket this year and has used his legs quite a bit. Um, who knows if the Tampa Bay defense is going to tighten up. They obviously got carved out by CJ Stroud last week. I don't know if Will Levis is on the same level, obviously, as him, and he's obviously played less at this point because he started the year as a backup. But he's obviously going to start. You have Derrick Henry and DeAndre Hopkins and Traylon Burks, and then a pretty good defensive pretty good defensive unit you know uh, for the Titans. Whereas the Buccaneers, I mean, obviously, pretty banged up. Honestly, I think Jamel Dean missing is kind of bad. Carlton Davis is also questionable. Logan Hall and then Cansey. It's like the only healthy people on this team that you really kind of recognize to be fully healthy are Antoine Winfield, Vita Vea, Devin White, Levante David, and Shakir Barrett. But let's see if they're going to be up to the task of taking on Derrick Henry, who has just finally found his groove this year. I do think this is kind of a tough matchup to grade, but I don't really trust the Buccaneers, so I am actually going to be going with Titans, I guess, which is an upset, even though it's in Tampa. Um, Tampa just hasn't been good at home. I mean, Tennessee obviously hasn't been good on their way. And yeah, I'm gonna go with Titans by 3 in this game. Another close game, I think. But looking to the next game, probably one of the biggest games of the week, we have the Ravens, who I honestly believe are the best team in the NFL right now, and the Browns, who ultimately they, really this kind of game would carry them momentum wise, where you have your division rival coming off a huge win against the Seahawks. And, you know, the crazy thing is that you have, a Ravens team that is pretty healthy, where the only person that is not really not playing on their offense is J.K. Dobbins, really, and then a couple of other questionables, but a very good defense, a defense that has finally started to look, like it's ready to, go over the top, and one of the best and the best kicker in the league as well with the Ravens. Just a very complete team that is just geared to win in the playoffs, and it looks like they can go deep this year, barring any injuries. Now you have the Browns, where they do have Deshaun Watson playing this week, but this is kind of a staunch task. He hasn't been playing much lately. He has to go up against the Ravens defense that has been doing very, very well. I mean, if we look here, the Ravens, they gave up 3 against Seattle, who has been, very good offensively this year. Arizona, obviously, but then you have Detroit, who is always really good offensively. They held them to 6. And then, I mean, Tennessee holding them to 16. It's kind of nothing to really showboat about. But the last loss coming to Pittsburgh, who obviously have a very good defense, but I think that, I think the Browns have to kind of look at the Pittsburgh game and see if they can't replicate some of what they did in order to contain Lamar Jackson and this offense of Baltimore, because they've obviously put up 24 or more points in the last 4 games. And the Browns, obviously, they slammed on the Cardinals, so they are coming off a win. They lost to Seattle, obviously, but then they barely beat Indy. They beat San Fran at the start of San Fran's kind of skid of games. And then they got absolutely stomped by Baltimore when they played them, obviously, earlier, essentially like a little over a month ago now. But yeah, looking at this, I don't really think the injuries matter too much for the Ravens. They've been playing fine regardless. Marlon Humphrey, obviously their star corner, and then Morgan Moses, their right tackle. But these other two not really mattering too much to me. I do think, Marquise Goodwin being out kind of sucks for Cleveland. I think that David Bell out and not a biggie, but Greg Newsome not being fully healthy, I think you look at these teams and you really, I mean, who's all going to defend Zay Flowers and Odell Beckham and Rashad Bateman, which isn't even the main threat on the Ravens, in my opinion. It is the combined ground effort by Lamar Jackson and Gus Edwards. And then but looking at this, I do expect Cleveland to lose. They really need Deshaun Watson to kind of reemerge and show that he is gonna be, the long-term solution, because up until this point, it's looked very, very bad, like a poor trade for Cleveland, with how banged up Deshaun has looked and how average he's looked when he's been on the field. And average is not gonna beat a Baltimore Ravens team. So with that being said, I am gonna say Ravens by I actually am gonna say them by 10, just because I think that they do have, the kind of team that can beat the Browns by 10, and it's in Baltimore. But, there is the chance for an upset because it's a division game, and obviously the tightest division in football. But, still Ravens by 10, barring anything crazy happening in this game. Moving on, we have 49ers Jaguars. This honestly kind of looks like a game where you really, as San Fran, is looking at obviously their last 3 games losses. They were obviously top of the NFC, being 5-0, and now they are 5-3. And you're looking at Jacksonville, who is, finally emerged as a team that, oh yes, we are going to be for real. Obviously, looking at the Niners, they've played, Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Minnesota, but they, obviously against Cincinnati, that game that was on the 29th of October. They've had a good amount of time to recoup after that. So hopefully Purdy can finally get back on track. He's looked uncharacteristic with some bad interceptions over, their losses, that have ultimately cost them, I think. And I think that he kind of just needed to cool down, have a little bit of time off, and do well. And obviously, now that they're tied with record with Seattle, who is the only competitor, in my opinion, in their division with them, you need to win this game. I think that, this will propel them into November and December. And, looking at their team, you obviously see here that they have Debo back, they have Ayuk, they have McCaffrey isn't banged up. And I think with that, you've got to be able to prove that you can go up against a team that has been hot for the last month. And, Trent Williams being questionable is kind of, bad. Aaron Branks being out, kind of bad. But I think this is a team that's very well coached. I think that they realize that they've got to win, that they've got to win now, type of thing. And it's like you look at this team and it's like with Nick Bosa, Chase Young now, Eric Armstead, and then I mean Javon Hargrave, questionable as well. But I think that they have such a good team that you've got to go out and you've got to prove that you can beat Jacksonville. And obviously, it shows here that this is kind of Jacksonville's game to lose because obviously, I mean, Jacksonville just hasn't been good at home for whatever reason, this year. And, you're coming off a team like Pittsburgh where you win 20-10, but the San Fran has a better offense. I think that San Fran can run away with this game potentially. I think that they're looking to get back and, put their stamp on this game so people aren't, the fans aren't freaking out anymore and they're saying, oh no, we're still legit. We're still that team to beat potentially. But I'm only going to give them a 3-point advantage. Again, I mean, I think that this is a very close game, barring anything crazy, like I've said. But yeah, I think that San Fran goes and they win this game, and they win it by 3. But I do think it's going to be a grueling, hard game because I think Jacksonville's defense is somewhat underrated. Moving on to Saints Vikings. Last week we saw kind of a miracle with Dobbs, showing up and, getting them the win against Atlanta. It was a nuts kind of game. I had predicted an Atlanta victory because it's like, Kirk Cousins going out. This being the first, obviously full game without Kirk at all. And they just kind of rallied, looking at, Jaron Hall obviously got knocked out last week, and then Dobbs came in off of like 2 days of practice or something like that. And it's like they're still without Justin Jefferson. Hawkinson being questionable, not good. AJ Osborne being questionable, not good. But, Dean Lowry's still questionable. But yeah, this looks like another uphill game for Dobbs. And obviously at this point he can kind of make his case on if, the Vikings should go ahead with him next year as their starter. But, because they obviously traded for him for a reason. They obviously, they lost Kirk for the year, when he was playing, really good ball, to be honest, this year. But the Vikings are in a place now where they can essentially, get into the postseason. I'm pretty sure if the season ended today, you have Minnesota has a playoff spot and it's at home, which they haven't been able to play well at home very much this year for whatever reason. But yeah, Dobbs, I think the team, they realize they can rally with Dobbs, type of thing. But then you have New Orleans, who their offense finally has come alive, and done like at least decent. I think 24 is a decent point total, even against a team like Chicago. And then against Indy, they were able to score a lot. but their offense has seemingly become, better. And Minnesota, I think, this is their game to kind of prove that they can beat a team like the Saints and, further draw in closer to Detroit. Obviously Detroit this week, they play the Chargers. You can see here, but a game that they could very well lose because they don't have that great of a defense that allows a lot of points. So the Vikings this week are kind of looking at this like, oh, we can draw even closer to Detroit, who obviously at this point is kind of the bona fide, team to beat in the NFC North. But, looking at New Orleans, they obviously have a division title to kind of defend where, Atlanta hasn't been playing the best lately and they've given up some games where they shouldn't have given them up, but they don't have too much worry in their division besides Atlanta and possibly Tampa Bay if they actually come alive. But New Orleans has been kind of off and on. And I think that, they do score probably a lot more points this week, than, maybe the Vikings can handle with a depleted offensive unit where it's like you're depending on Madison and Addison. And granted, those are two gifted players who obviously they look good in the system. But yeah, I think that, the Saints can win this game by probably like 3 points. I don't want to give them too much credit because I think that the Vikings defense is playing better this year. I don't think that they're as liable as last year, but I do think the Saints just have more talent than the Vikings. And not to mention that their defense is still very, very feisty and, competitive. So yeah, Saints by 3. I think it could be more, to be honest, but I don't trust the inconsistencies of like Derek Carr. I think he needs to prove that he can play well a couple months in a row for me to really trust him, to be honest with you. And who knows if Dobbs was like a one hit wonder, but obviously, Arizona's obviously tanking and they were probably like, oh, we can give you a chance with a team that might be able to use you. So that's why I think that they traded him because I think Dobbs played better than anyone expected on a crappy Cardinals team before they traded him to the Vikings. I don't think they traded him because they didn't think that he, couldn't still produce. I think that they just have a clear plan with what they're going to do with in the draft next year following the season. But, well, time will tell with Dobbs and the Vikings, but until he kind of proves over several games that he's the guy, I mean, I'm not going to trust it. Next, we have Falcons Cardinals. The Falcons finally get a game where, they should be able to win, even with Kyler Murray coming back. Even with Kyler Murray coming back, and I mean, Atlanta Falcons missing a couple of contributors. Mac Hollins, I think, was playing, pretty good ball. And obviously, Grady Jarrett's been out for a while now on a very veteran defense, but I think the thing with the Falcons is that obviously they're still not starting Ritter, right? They're starting Taylor Heineke, and I've always liked Heineke. He's got that competitive spirit that, can provide somewhat of a flair because he's got kind of a Brett Favre style where it's like he will continue to compete no matter, what's going on into the game and his resilience, his mental resilience, and I think that this is a team that obviously, you look at it. They obviously have Drake London and Van Jefferson, with Mac Hollins being out. They obviously don't have Josh Ali. And, they don't have, they have Scotty Miller and then Kaderil Hodge. But, Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, probably one of the best young tandems in the league, if not one of the best tandems of running back in the league, to be honest with you, behind a very good O line. But a very veteran defense that I think, they definitely can make things hard on Kyler. I don't think this is a team that Kyler's just going to be able to come in and he's going to be able to beat and rally the troops. I'm not even sure. The thing is with Kyler is it's like, ugh, I think that, looking at this and thinking about how Kyler coming back, I'm just curious as to how he's going to do. He's obviously going up against a good defense with AJ Terrell and Jesse Bates. Jesse Bates has been having an incredible year on his new team. And it's like, this is it's going to end up being, I feel like, the Kyler Murray and Marquise Brown show again, where it's like those are the two guys on the team, because you don't really have James Conner. Amari DeMarcado is out. Marlon Mack, IR. So they have Keontae Ingram and then James Conner questionable. What is going to go on? And then a banged up O line. What is going to happen with this team to make you think that they're essentially gonna do well? Like I just don't see it. I just don't see it. You know. So it's like I think that Arizona can get really carved up by Bijan and just about anybody. Just about anybody on the Falcons. I'm gonna predict it's gonna be my biggest spread of the day, but I think that the Falcons win by 14. I think that this is a lot closer than you would expect. Than I would expect, to be honest with you. I think that they win by 14 over Arizona, even though Arizona's at home. Because I think the Falcons know they got to win this game, or they might as well call it quits for their season. Maybe not call it quits, but you're kind of like, oh, we're going up against the Cardinals. We got to make sure that we win this game, you know? But moving on, we have Lions, Chargers. The Chargers, to me, playing really, really well. They went out and they showed that they could beat a top defense. Detroit gives up a lot of points. And I mean, you even look at the way that Vegas played against Detroit last week, kind of smothering them under their new coaching. And then obviously the Lions got pummeled by Baltimore. But that's another reason why I've been saying Baltimore is, the top team in the league is they've been showing up to these teams that are, bona fide good in their division. But I think that, the Lions, could really get carved up by Herbert. I mean, if you look at, Las Vegas, who obviously, had a rookie QB, a 25-year-old rookie QB come in and carve them up. And then the next week you're going up against Herbert. And clearly, the Chargers, they want to prove and try to get within distance because right now they are not in the playoff picture, I don't think, in the AFC. Like a 500 record's not going to cut it. It isn't, it's more stacked at the upper echelon of the AFC. So the Los Angeles Chargers at this point are a team that's looking, they're looking in on the playoffs and like what teams do we have to win to do well? And I think that their defense has been playing better. I think that, the amount of points that they are giving up, I don't care who it is, type of thing. I think that, against Dallas they held them to 20. That's kind of good. Kansas City is obviously, kind of the big brother beating up on the little brother type of thing. But obviously they were able to beat Vegas, a team that, just slammed Detroit, you know. But I think that, they do win this game. I think I think the Lions score a good amount. I think they kind of have a resurgence there because their offense is their bread and butter at this point. Like I don't think their defense has really figured it out, to be honest with you. But I think that Los Angeles, feeling the pressure comes out and really shows, this, they show the Lions team that obviously the Lions didn't play last week, but I think that the Chargers, going out and winning against, the Jets and putting up a good amount of points against the Jets defense that has looked to be the strength of this team for weeks. I think that their offense will click a lot better against the Lions. So I am actually going to go with the Chargers, and I'm going to say win by 4. I think it could come down to the wire in this game. where, Herbert has another chance to shine and show that he is that guy at the end of the game. But yeah, Chargers by 4. Moving on, we have Giants against the Cowboys. I am not even going to say much about this game. The Giants are screwed. They don't have a chance. Daniel Jones, getting a torn ACL, off of a season where he just ultimately got banged up beyond belief because of how poor the O-line is for the Giants. I don't care who you're putting in at quarterback for the Giants. They are at risk for an injury. They're at risk for an injury, and obviously you just have the Cowboys who just lost and, their biggest game of the year, a game that I was like, oh, they need to prove it this game. Otherwise, I think that they're the same old Cowboys that are going to continue to beat up on these, subpar teams, but never be able to win against good teams. So I'm going to say that they're going to whoop on the Giants, of course, like they did, opening week of the season. And it's just going to be ugly. I'm actually going to say Dallas by 21 points this game. I don't think it's going to be as bad as week 1 because there was a lot of things that went against the Giants, more so than just what a lot of sacks give you. Like there was strip sacks and turnovers and all of that. And I don't think a rookie is going to, maybe he does, get, have the same kind of thing. But yeah, this margin, I think, is the biggest margin we've seen all year. And yeah, the analytics just do not give New York a chance at all. So yeah, 21 point spread for the Cowboys. Next, we have Commanders and the Seahawks. The Commanders, still offensively performing well with Howell, which isn't, isn't unexpected, to be honest, because they didn't trade on the offensive side of the ball, but they went up against a poor offense in New England and still, they gave up 17. The Seahawks are definitely going to look to get back in the win column, against an easier opponent, knowing that they could still secure the, the first spot when you don't know if San Fran is going to perform against Jacksonville. And then you, of course, have Washington, where it's like you're in a division where you would ultimately have to beat Dallas in order to get into the playoffs, more than likely. But I just don't see it against Seattle. Seattle's going to have a bounce back game. I think that Washington Commanders defense is going to get more and more exposed, when teams figure out that these players that just aren't as good as Young and Sweat, continue to play and they know how to exploit them. And, Seattle's just got too good of an offense. So I'm going to predict Seattle by 7, with a chance for even more because it's at Seattle and they obviously just, they just got mauled against the Ravens, who have obviously, easily a top 5 defense. But moving on, to our Sunday night game, we have Jets visiting the Raiders, a Raiders team that looks like a changed team now. They look like a changed team now, where I think it's what is it, Aiden O'Connell or whatever his name is. Let me pull it up here. Yeah, Aiden O'Connell starting. And then you have obviously Jacobs and Adams, who really led, they really led this, they obviously led this team last year with yards, touchdowns, and, you name it, they did it. And then, of course, Jacoby Myers, who's their kind of young talent that has kind of taken the spotlight away from Hunter Renfrow. And then, even Trey Tucker, who's obviously starting over Hunter Renfrow. And, stacked tight end room with Michael Mayer and Austin Hooper. But this looks like a changed team where it's like they ultimately badmouth, their former coach. I'm not going to say his name. And they were like, this is a team that can win. They can play, and obviously in their division, with a game like this, I fully expect them to come in swinging against the Jets team where it's like they haven't proven that they can play. They haven't proven that they can really play offensively. I do think the defense will rebound a little bit after being, slashed by the Chargers, but you know, I fully expect, the Raiders to still win. They have way more talent on the offensive side. They can still potentially, get a playoff spot if they, keep winning and keep this going. But obviously a huge win last week. And yeah, I'm gonna go with the Raiders on this one, even though they say that the Jets are going to win, which just surprises me. I think that, yeah, if the Jets have a big defensive game, they can definitely win. Or if the offense finally emerges and they start to play up to their potential minus, I think that Brees Hall has been doing pretty good. But they need someone else to step up on the offense, to be honest with you, and give Zach Wilson an actual reliable target, which I just don't see happening, to be honest with you. But the Jets, yeah, looking at this, it's like you have Garrett Wilson still. I like Garrett Wilson, but I don't like the protection for Zach Wilson. So yeah, I'm going to say that I think that, the New York Jets, until they can prove that they can actually go, then yeah, they really need to prove that they can get going on offense. Otherwise, I think that, even Devontae Adams is going to be able to get open against even a skilled cornerback like Sauce Gardner because he's just that good. And I like Sauce, but he isn't playing, quite as good as he was last year, in my opinion, which, is to be expected getting tape on a guy like him. But he's not the only guy on defense. And yep, I think the Raiders are going to win this game, even though it shows here that it's apparently an upset. But they are at home. I think that Max Crosby is going to be able to get after Zach Wilson at will, to be honest with you, because of the O line of the Jets, which is going to ultimately limit what they're able to do. So I'm going to say Raiders by 7 because, yeah, I don't think it's going to be like this where they just don't play very well. And I mean, even when they were playing early, they were ultimately shooting themselves in the foot. They were shooting themselves in the foot. And I just don't expect that. I just don't expect that to happen where, you know, O'Connell starts to play as bad as Jimmy G was. Like, Jimmy G was just a joke this year. Jimmy joke. But yeah, that's my last prediction on the final game on Sunday. Gonna hold off on Monday. I think I'm gonna just release a video tomorrow analyzing what I think is gonna happen between the Broncos and who do they play? They play Buffalo because I don't think it's gonna be that close of a game. I think the Broncos have had a couple wins here recently where it's like, oh yeah, you get a couple of wins against some, struggling teams. Let's go and just look at it real quick. But they somehow beat, Kansas City, which I think was a fluke. I think that Kansas City just beat themselves this game. And then, I mean, beating my team Green Bay when they were on a losing streak, not that impressive, and they barely beat us. But yeah, looking at the Bills, they're definitely going to rebound after a tough Saints Bengals loss. But yeah, this demographic really shows, what I'm thinking about this game. But who knows? Maybe Denver pulls a crazy upset. But I doubt it. But definitely more on that in my video that I'm going to release tomorrow with it. But yeah, the Broncos are coming off a bye, so who knows? Maybe they make it a game. But with that being said, if anybody has any questions or comments or what they would like to say, you can definitely post those in the comments, after this whole, stream goes live on YouTube, or you can ask in the chat right now. I think, a really good amount of games this week that look like they could be really, really close, to be honest with you. But with the way the NFL's been this year, who knows? I may be really off on some of these games. I've been willing to accept. But other than that, this is CastCast, and I'm your host, Casty Strader, signing off.